All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're gonna dig into spiral binding for notebooks.
Okay.
So you've seen it, you know what it is, you probably use it. But we're gonna dive a little deeper. Our source today is gonna be Lion Paper. They are a manufacturer of spiral notebooks. They serve pretty much everybody,
Mm,
from students to large corporations, so they know what they're talking about.
Rob.
And today, what we're gonna do for you is we want to take a look at what it is. Like, what are the pros? What are the cons? How can it strategically be used for different needs that you might have?
Yeah, because when you think about wanting to acquire knowledge efficiently, it's amazing how something as ubiquitous as a spiral notebook actually has a lot of really smart thought and design behind it.
Yeah.
So we're going to go beyond like how to bind paper together, and we're going to look at how spiral binding affects usability, durability, the feel of it, things like that.
So, okay, first of all, what is spiral binding?
So for you, imagine taking, like a stack of paper for your notebook, right? And instead of a glued spine, you've got a series of like little holes punched along the edge.
Hmm.
And you take a continuous coil, it's either plastic or metal, and wind it through those holes. And so that's what creates the hinge. So it allows the pages to turn a full circle and also lay flat.
Mm.
And so if you're, running from, the classroom to a workshop or somewhere where you need to be taking notes, the lay flat capability, it's a huge benefit.
Yeah, and the source, Lion Paper, they highlighted how useful that is for schools, workshops, places where you really need to get stuff done.
Mm.
Like, I could even see it being great for field work, right?
Yeah.
If you're outside somewhere, you need to be able to write on something flat, it's got to be convenient.
Right.
And there are different kinds of spiral binding, right? It's
Absolutely.
not just one thing.
Yes, yeah. We can categorize them based on the material that the coil is made from and the structure of the binding itself. So first, the material. So you have plastic coils, and those are really lightweight. They're flexible. And then the huge benefit of that is that they come in a variety of colors. So for things like promotional materials or student notebooks where you might want to, like, inject some personality or match a specific brand color, it's a really inexpensive and appealing option.
Yeah, I can see how that would tie into branding for sure.
Exactly.
Now, what about the metal coils?
So metal coils are a little different. They give a much more polished, professional look to the notebook. They're also more rigid, so some people like that. And you'll see them more in corporate notebooks or like a premium planner, things like that. And one thing to note, because Lion Paper pointed this out, is that metal can bend if it's not treated properly.
Right. Okay, so it's like the flexibility and color options of plastic versus kind of the rigidness of metal, but, maybe be careful about bending it. Now, you also mentioned the structural differences in the binding. What are those?
Yeah, so the most common one that you'll see, and maybe what you picture when you think about a spiral notebook, is a single loop spiral. So one continuous coil. It's the most straightforward option. It's generally the most economical as well.
And what about twin loop?
Twin loop binding is also called Y or O, and it's where you use pairs of loops instead of the single continuous. And it gives a really upscale appearance. It binds really securely, and so you'll find them in like high quality planners and presentation books, just
Yeah.
items where like a refined look is important.
So single loop, every day, twin loop, fancy.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I noticed in the research, it talked about plastic comb binding. Now, is that similar?
It is similar because it does involve holes being punched in the edge. But it's very different from spiral binding because instead of a continuous coil or wire loops, it's a plastic comb, and it has these teeth that are inserted into the holes. The major difference, and why Lion Paper pointed it out, is that it doesn't give you the 360-degree rotation that spiral binding gives you. So if you're someone who likes that fold back feature, then you might want to go with spiral binding instead of comb binding.
That's a really important clarification. I could see how a lot of people would just lump all those together.
Right.
Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting is how they are produced. Lion Paper talked about large-scale production being automated. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. So for high volume commercial products, you need it streamlined. So the pages are printed, they're trimmed, they're punched with evenly spaced holes.
Mm-hmm.
And then a machine automatically feeds the coil through. And then the ends of the coil are crimped or sealed to prevent them from coming undone. And throughout the entire process, there are quality control checks to make sure the pages are aligned and the binding is durable.
So a pretty efficient operation overall.
Yes, very efficient.
Now, okay, let's talk about why you would choose spiral binding. Like, what are the pros? What are the advantages, especially for commercial products?
So that 360-degree fold back capability, it's a big one.
Yeah.
So, imagine you're in a situation where you have limited workspace.
Sure.
Maybe you're at a crowded desk, you're standing up, you need to take notes, you can fold the cover completely around to the back, you can use it with one hand. And so that can be super practical in a lot of
Yeah, I
situations.
mean, I can imagine being in a meeting, I'm writing notes, I don't have a lot of space, that's super convenient.
Exactly, exactly. And then also you have the lay flat capability.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've ever tried to, write or sketch in a notebook that just keeps snapping shut,
Hmm.
you'll really appreciate that feature. You need it for tasks where you need both hands. You need to reference material. It makes it user friendly.
Absolutely. And in terms of document size, like how big or small of a document can you make with this?
So it's actually pretty versatile.
Okay.
Lion Paper says it can go from like a short 40-page booklet to a 200-page manual.
Yeah.
So pretty good range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, when you're talking about companies and branding, they want to be able to customize things.
Of course.
And one of the nice things about this is that you can. So you can choose a coil diameter to match the paper thickness. And the coils come in a ton of different colors. So you can get it to really perfectly match your company's logo or just their aesthetic.
Yeah, keep that branding nice and consistent.
Exactly.
And for smaller businesses or anybody who is watching their budget, what's the cost look like for this kind of binding?
So the good thing about it is it generally has a lower minimum order quantity. So it's a more affordable option, even if you're only doing a mid-size production run. So that's good.
Okay, so some clear advantages there, but everything has its downsides. What are the cons to this binding method?
Well, so one of the things is that you can't do a lot of spine labeling. So
Okay,
because the coil is open, you can't print on it like you could a normal book. So if you're going to shelve it, if you're going to try to identify it easily, that can be a drawback.
that's a really good point, especially if you're thinking about retail display.
Exactly.
Now, what about the durability of the binding itself?
So durability kind of depends on the material that you use. Metal looks really nice and professional, but it can bend if you handle it roughly.
Right.
Plastic is flexible, so it won't bend, but it can stretch out or break over time if there's a lot of stress on it.
So not the most rugged. What about like the overall impression?
Yeah, so this is interesting. Lion Paper says that it can be perceived as less formal, so it might not be the best choice for very high-end products. If you're going for like a luxury feel, that may not be the way to go.
Like you're not gonna see a spiral bound, executive diary or anything like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Right.
And then, there's the storage, so they tend to be bulkier than perfect bound books when you're stacking them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're concerned about shelf space or shipping costs, that's something to think about.
Yeah, those logistical issues are always important to think about.
Right.
Now, one thing that Lion Paper mentioned is that there are some other alternatives, right?
Yes. So if you're looking at retail or you want that spine, where you can print on it, then you might want to go with case bound, which is hardcover, or perfect bound. And that's where the pages are glued together to make a flat spine. So you're not going to get the same functionality as spiral, but you'll get that nice professional look.
All right, so, trade-offs for everything. So we've
Yeah.
talked about the pros and cons. Let's go back to where it excels. What are some of the best applications for spiral binding?
So academic notebooks, definitely a big one. So flexible. The lay flat capability is great for note taking. Corporate training manuals, same thing.
Okay.
The lay flat's great for that. Engineering, design sketchbooks, that's another one. You want to be able to use the full page.
Absolutely.
Calendars and appointment books, you need that lay flat feature. And then, of course, we talked about promotional giveaways earlier. They're inexpensive. There's a lot of options. So those are some of the big ones.
So a good variety of applications for sure. What does Lion Paper say are some things people should be thinking about if they're considering spiral binding? What do you need to keep in mind?
So first, they say to think about the user.
Okay.
Like, will they actually use the fold over, the lay flat? Is it going to be helpful for them? They also talk about how the product is going to be distributed. So are you going to put it on a shelf? Or are you going to hand it out? That's going to determine whether or not the spine labeling is going to be an issue for you. You also want to think about durability. So is it something that's going to be used every day? Maybe go with metal. If it's just casual use, maybe plastic's fine. And then design requirements. How important is it that it matches your branding? All that stuff needs to be thought about.
So this is way more strategic than just, hey, let's bind some paper.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, in terms of scaling production, how easy is that with spiral binding?
So it's actually pretty good for mid-sized print runs, under 50,000. It's more cost effective than hardcover. It's more cost effective than wire binding. Production is faster. And if you need to add or remove pages, it's really easy to do.
That's a huge advantage for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely.
Now, for the big corporate clients, what kind of stuff is available to them?
So they get the really fancy options. So they can color match the coil precisely to their branding. Um, they can get pre-printed tab dividers. And they have lots of options for the cover, like poly, laminate, things like that. And something that's becoming more and more important to a lot of companies is sustainability.
Yeah.
And they have FSC certified materials, so it's all responsibly sourced paper.
Okay, good.
No
So
problem.
even the big companies can feel good about that.
Exactly.
One last thing, and I think it's kind of a big one when you're talking about production, packaging and logistics.
Hmm.
How does spiral binding affect that?
Well, because they can't be compressed as easily as a perfect bound book, you have to account for the fact that they're going to take up more space.
Oh, okay.
So you might have to pay more for packaging and shipping, especially if you're shipping internationally. Lion Paper suggests that you adjust your packaging accordingly, and they have solutions to help with that,
Okay.
like reinforced cartons and coil guards so that the coil doesn't get messed up during shipping.
Right. So you got to think about the whole journey, right?
Absolutely.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about spiral binding today. What would you say is the key message for the listener?
So the key message is that spiral binding is a super practical option.
Mm.
It's versatile, it's adaptable, it's easy to use, it's efficient to produce. It's really great for a lot of buyers out there.
Yeah, it's way more than just a way to bind pages.
Right.
There's a lot of thought that goes into it. It affects the functionality. It affects how it looks, how it feels. So as a final thought, we've talked about all the different options and applications for spiral binding.
Hmm.
How do you think it could influence the usability and the perceived value of a notebook in your field, in your area of interest? It's something to think about. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive today,
Thanks.
and we'll see you next time.